Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Go ahead and start it off, Abby. Be funny.
Well, welcome to The Connected Life with me and Pietze, giggling in the background. What if I just kicked Justin off and made it a me and you show?
I mean, I might be fine with that because I'm number one.
Wait, are we starting? Yes. No, but then there's Jonny. You act like he didn't even exist. But you're talking about like when we...
No, I just wanted to introduce people one at a time. And
This is a great podcast, guys.
Pietze started giggling with me right away. So she's here. And then obviously Justin's here because he's my husband. And then the star of the show, Jonny Duffield.
Jonny.
Pietze's
Jonny
husband.
I like
Field.
being the star.
It's actually exciting for me because I've been on so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I get to share Jonny.
Yeah. Having you on a second time here in a row, Jonny. It's
Very
amazing.
I
exciting.
know.
It's really good for me because Pietze always gets to tell our story without me, and I don't really get a voice in the matter.
Aw.
Oh,
So,
should I take
this is
ownership for
great.
this right now? Do I need to
You
validate
probably
your
should.
pain and your experience in that?
I tell you what, I'm feeling way better about episode 2. I just got the kids in bed. I've got a margarita. I'm ready to
Oh my
talk.
gosh, I'm so jealous.
And we
We could
feel
go
really
all
good
night.
about this episode because we recorded the entire thing earlier and then found out the files were corrupted.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, Justin didn't turn his mic on.
Yeah, that was the first thing. And let me just say that was after like a half an hour of Justin like almost putting his head through a wall because everything kept going wrong with this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like in terms
how
of
nice is-
like technical difficulties.
I
How
was just
nice is it, though, how Abby just tried to cover Justin in love and safety there? She's like, oh, the files were corrupted.
well,
Like,
they were
completely covering Justin. Like I
it
love
wasn't his
that.
fault.
Yeah, that was very nice of
such
you, Abs.
kindness.
Well, here's the truth. He is the only reason any of the things ever happened.
It's actually very true.
I can't throw him under the bus when I'm the like person that is driving the bus all the time. I don't know.
No, you're not driving the
No.
bus. Justin is driving the bus. You
Yeah.
are just a passenger
You don't
on
want to
this whole
drag me out of the
thing.
driver's seat and throw me under it. Because then it'll just careen off. the-
Justin drives the
road.
bus and makes sure it gets to the destination every time.
Yeah. Well, Pietze is here with us in Reading. She has come out here because we are releasing and working on a project that we are so freaking excited
so
about.
excited about, like a long time coming.
Yes. It is called The Pathway to Freedom. Understand your heart journey. Discover how your emotions are trying to heal you. Every time I
That's good
say
stuff right
discover
there.
how your emotions are trying to heal you. Every time I love it.
I know Abby's has a high off of the tagline.
Well, it's just so exciting. And this is we made the course together and it dramatically impacted our lives. And so Johnny's taking care of the kids and holding down the fort
Back in Colorado.
back in Colorado while
Yeah.
we are here working on getting everything ready for it. And honestly, the conversation that we're about to have is so beautiful. I was really, really moved the first time we had it. I actually
too.
really was. I came in like really kind of spinning because of some stuff in my world and just instantly like felt so much of the love from you guys talking about the hard things in your journey, but being so kind and compassionate and validating towards each other. But it is a remarkable shift that happened in your life a couple years ago when we made this course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, this course, why we're telling this story and giving so much detail is because this course was birthed out of so much pain. And we had gotten to a point in our marriage where, and you'll see this over the course of our stories, that Jonny and I have weirdly have had circumstance after circumstance after circumstance that has made our life hard. And it tends to compound in one season. And those are like make it or break it seasons almost. It's like when you have thing after thing after thing, it tends to create a domino effect where life just gets harder. Then you have less grace, then you have less emotions, you have less margin, and you are fighting more. And it got to a head where basically I had said to Jonny, I'm like, we can't change our circumstances. Like we've tried and we cannot change these circumstances. The only thing we can change is ourselves. And how do we do that?
I got mad at you when you told me that.
Did you really?
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you got pissed off. And here we are now. We've like, it's changed our lives. And we're now sharing this with the world because it has changed our lives so much. And so I just took a deep dive into really figuring out how to use your emotions and what's coming up internally as fuel for change.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very, very, very exciting to get to hear you guys do this. I just want to say, if you're single out there listening, please listen, because it will give you hope and understanding. And the more you actually understand what marriage realistically is and how you can partner with healing and redemption through it, because so many people are scared subconsciously of marriage.
Yeah.
But if you actually get to hear a beautiful story that gives you power, like you can actually change things.
Hope in the midst of a mess.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really empowers you. Those are the stories that helped me be able to get married. And then if you're married, you will find yourself in these stories. You will understand the moments, and it's going to give you lots of keys.
And I will say this, I was just talking to one of our friends who's single a couple hours ago. And she was describing to me a situation she had with a friend, and I was walking her through some healing about it. And she's like, how do you know that? And I'm like, because this is the exact situation I've had to face in my marriage. And so even, you know, what's funny is that like a lot of my pain that I faced with Jonny and us having to navigate our pain around situations, I've also had the same type of conversations with you, Abby. You know, like pain is just pain. It doesn't, when you're in close relationship with someone, you're going to face pain, you know? So I hope that anyone can take this story and even put yourselves in two different shoes. It might not be a marriage story, but understand when significant pain comes up and how to walk through it.
Yeah. Because if you're not married, you do have primary attachments in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just as an FYI, me and Pietze are also going to create we're creating a course currently called Creating Safe Relationships. And it is the second part to the Pathway to Freedom. So if you want to create safe relationships, go ahead and go to justinandabby.com, sign up for the Pathway to Freedom.
And that course I am equally excited about. It's going to be phenomenal. I cannot wait. Here we go.
Okay, so let's start in your story. The last time we ended our last session with you guys falling in love and getting married. So let's just jump right in there. And tell us about what it felt like when you guys, like when you finally got together, what it felt like to get married.
Yeah. Well, you know, like obviously we kind of left off at our wedding, which was so amazing. And I will just say, like, our wedding, it was, I don't know if, I think it was the best day of my life. Like, even looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh. It was everything once I had a yes in my heart for Jonny, I was all in. You know, like I was up and down, but once I had a yes, I was all in. And my mom even was like, it was crazy because I've never felt, you could feel the energy radiating off of you. Like you were like bouncing up and down, so excited to marry him. Like I just came in like so excited to join my life with this person, so excited for this life that we were going to build together. Yeah. You know? And what did you think about me, honey, when I walked down the aisle? Just curious.
I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, is what I thought. And I agree. I mean, that day was magical. And honestly, the whole time leading up to that day, the 6 months of engagement, it was funny because your entire world was falling apart, but between me and you, things were perfect. And honestly, things didn't get hard until after we got married. But like in that season, like things were so perfect and things were so magical. And even getting married, I mean, we always talk about how walking away from our wedding, like when you walk to your car or whatever, that was the best moment of both of our lives. We were just both so ecstatic to finally be married, to finally, just quote unquote, walk off into the sunset, Yeah.
And have sex for the first time.
Well, and
that was also
actually,
very exciting.
Technically, well, yes, very much so. I was 18, so I was very excited about that. technically we didn't go to have sex first. Technically we went to Walmart and I stood in the world's longest Walmart line.
Yeah, it was kind of a disaster our wedding night. We ended up in
for
Walmart.
Condoms?
No, for a lighter for candles.
Because we wanted it to be romantic.
You know how Walmart in the middle of the night they close all of the. This is before self checkout, which dates us. But how they would close all of the lines except for the one in the middle.
Oh, yep.
And so literally we stood in that line for like half an hour.
And the checker was going so slow, and we're like, we're waiting, virgins waiting to have sex. We were pissed.
I'm gonna be honest. Like at that point, I'm walking out of that Walmart with that lighter, not paying for it. And I'm like, I owe you. I'll come back and pay tomorrow.
I owe you. That's how Justin ended up in jail on his wedding night. I owe you. That one's going to snowball real quick. But yeah, I always laugh because I'm like, I saw Jonny like cry twice our entire relationship. Up till that point. The first time was when I broke up with him. The second time was right after we had sex.
Aww.
Not because it was bad, but because it was real good.
You blew my mind.
Totally. 100%.
Oh, it was good.
But, I think after that, we went into such a magical season of creating this life together. And it's funny because people are like, how could you get married so young? Jonny was 18 when we got married. He turned 19 the next day. So I always laugh because I'm like, yeah, the first year I broke up with him on his birthday. The second year I gave him sex. So I made up for it. But
it was worth it.
Yeah, it was totally worth it. I'm totally worth it, babe. But
absolutely. Time out. Is this podcast about sex or what are we talking about?
Well,
here?
It could go there. You never know with us. But I will say, you were not a normal 18-year-old. You were not a normal 18-year-old. Like at that point, you had worked 3 jobs. You had 2 houses. You were very
jobs simultaneously, not like I had worked 3 jobs. I was working 3 jobs.
Yeah, you had graduated at 16, so you were very mature for your age. And because my family was so unstable growing up financially, I thought, man, here's this guy who's like
a homeowner. That's hot.
It was a double homeowner. That's real
landlord.
hot.
Yeah. I was a landlord at 18, which is bizarre, but
amazing.
But it just felt so like stable, and we created this magical life with this man that I was like, oh, like my life is going to be so different, and my life has just fallen apart. I've just lost everyone, and now I have this man who's like sweeping me off my feet, and we're going to build this amazing life together. And it was like we were so in love in those first that first month especially was just I was like that first month was
you guys have personalities that actually get to along really well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very similar in the way that we see life and do life. We have a lot of fun together. We have great chemistry. We think the same things are funny. Like it just was so magical and easy.
Yeah.
It was so easy.
And then
the dissociation bubble popped. So little did I know that the whole time I was planning my wedding, my life on the side was falling apart. This huge ministry.
You knew it.
I knew it, but I wasn't
But
I wasn't connected to the pain of it. I was shoving the pain down. So people would ask me, "How are you doing?" And I'd smile and say, "I'm doing great. I'm doing good." They'd be like, "You okay? You doing okay with everything?" I'd be like, "I'm doing great. I'm doing great with everything."
And what did you experience during that, Jonny?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's, without having been in the community that Pietze was in, it's very difficult to understand what a big deal it was that it fell apart. I mean, it's not like a church that she went to on Wednesdays and Sundays fell apart. It was like a community. I mean, it wasn't a cult, but I mean, it had that. Everybody shared everybody shared everything, and everybody's kids did everything together, and every day was spent working towards the common goal, and everybody was excited about it. And I mean, there was people
dreamed this up since I was 12.
Yeah.
Since you were 12, yeah. And
I was not the cult leader. Let's just get that
clear. I mean, there were people who literally the person who was supposed to officiate our wedding dropped out. There were bridesmaids who dropped out. There were people who weren't coming, we were having to fill in gaps last minute of people who didn't even show up to the wedding. People who Pietze had literally lived in their house with them. You know, so it wasn't a small thing. And I think in retrospect, had I been emotionally intelligent, I probably would have done a better job of caring for Pietze back then. But I mean, she was just fine. She was doing fine. So it's all good. We were all fine. And then everything, you know, fell apart a month after we got married.
For an 18-year-old boy, slowly turning into a man is like, yeah, she says she's good. I guess she's good. All right, here we go.
Well, and I had no emotional intelligence at all. I had no idea that you should ask questions or that you should, you know, like I had no idea what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I remember at that time, after everything had fallen apart, I had moved to where Jonny grew up and we were youth pastors in his home church. And I called him up one night and I was like, hey, I can't go.
On a Wednesday night, I was at church preparing for youth group.
Oh, Lord, I feel so bad when you say that every time. He was there preparing and I just called him up and said, I mean, I just hit my wall. I started having panic attacks and I just realized, and I kind of go into detail about this in a previous episode where I talk about, you know, deconstructing my faith. But it was like I hit my wall. I couldn't get myself to go. And I had told him that. I was like, it's like I've run a race and my face is in the mud and I can't get back up. I just can't get back up. I can't get myself to do it. And not only can I not come to church tonight, I don't know if I could ever go back.
Which, Jonny, what was that like for you?
I mean, it was okay. In the moment, it wasn't that terrible. But in the everything that happened in the moment wasn't that terrible because I'm so good at dissociating. It is, I am amazing at dissociating. And so I didn't feel a ton in the moment, but looking back on it now, it was a really huge deal because so much of our relationship, I mean, I think we mentioned this in the last episode. I can't remember what all we talked about, but so much of our relationship was founded on the idea that we were meant to be together for a bigger purpose.
Right.
You know, and so that quickly, you know, a month into marriage to have her be like, yeah, I don't want to do this was, I mean, it completely altered the course of our life on a lot of levels because we had set up our whole life. I mean, we had a house, we had everything set up. We had a job, we were working at the church and we were in it together and we had vision and we were excited. And then all of a sudden she was just done, which is completely understandable in retrospect. But in the moment, it's like, oh, crap, what do I do now?
And especially the idea that she was dissociated herself as well. And then all of a sudden, all this kind of starts unfolding. It comes more out of left field. It's not like there's a slow burn up to it. Like, oh man, I'm having a lot of pain. Something's going on inside of me. I'm starting to contemplate things. I'm not sure. It's just, holy shit, I'm done with this. And you're like, what? Yeah. Okay.
Well, and I think for me, and this is something I'm exploring, and this is completely off topic, but something that I'm exploring right now is that in the course of our early relationship, I completely abandoned myself to be a couple.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had when she called and said, hey, I can't do this anymore. I had no sense of like, that's fine. You just do your thing. This is my job. I'm still in it. Like, I can keep doing this. You can be on your own process. I mean, I had so completely let go of my personal identity and just assimilated into being a couple that I was like, there's no way I'm doing this without you.
Right.
You know, which I think if I was in that situation today, I would have reacted completely different. I would have said, hey, we're stable here. We have a house. We have a job. Things are good. I'm going to keep doing my thing. You can go on your journey.
Right.
You know, but I mean, I had no sense of self at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's be real. I was really, really strong. I was strong I was a strong personality. I was a dominant personality. I had strong opinions. Yeah. And Jonny is a 9 on the Enneagram, you know? And
I am the description of a 9.
He is the quintessential description of a 9.
They should put my picture next to the description.
100%. You do have some strong 8, though, because you're very visionary and passionate and can light a fire under your own butt. But
So is that a new Enneagram? I'm a Jonny.
I'm a Jonny. I'm a Jonny. And so, you know, even hearing you say that, because I haven't heard you actually process things that way. I haven't heard this thought yet, but I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, you know, I didn't know what it was like. I was so dominant even back then because of my own because of my own insecurity, because of my own pain, that like, yeah, I have a lot of like empathy and compassion even when you say that, because I'm like, yeah, I think that I probably added to that a lot, you know, with how strong I was and how right or wrong and how much I believed I was right.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
you did make me throw away half of my clothes.
That is true. I'm so sorry.
I watched Pietze dominate Jonny, and I just kept thinking, I'm so glad it's not me anymore.
Oh, Lord. I'm going to have some inner healing to do after this one.
By that point in our relationship, we'd gotten good.
You had a voice.
Yeah.
You were becoming your own person, which was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you start having panic attacks. You're melting down. You're like, I cannot go to church anymore, which was the number one priority you both put. That you'd love God, you'd go to church, and then you'd take care of each other.
Not just go to church, like we would build the church.
Yeah, totally.
Our life's mission was the church.
Marriage was third on the list.
Marriage was third on the list. Marriage
Uh-huh.
was all the way down. So now I've just taken that out
Off the table.
because I'm realizing like, oh, I'm going through a faith crisis,
Right.
you know, which it was the right thing to do for me to step down at that point. I think a lot of churches get into trouble when you try to push through.
I agree.
And you're having a faith
Yeah.
crisis. However, because Jonny and I were so codependent towards each other, again, he's like, okay, well, if you're quitting, I'm quitting.
Yeah. So your life that you thought was really stable and steady now is...
And within a week of us quitting the church, we had 2 other jobs that both randomly ended within a week. So now, crazy circumstances, we're finding ourselves, we resigned after we resigned from that job. Within the week, our 2 other jobs ended. And we're like,
everything falls apart.
yeah, again. And I just been through my whole life falling apart. So it's like, what do we do now? Now we feel completely lost. And there's nowhere to go.
Right.
Because my entire life just blew up.
And
this is where Jonny's life is, but everything revolves around the church. And I don't know that I can handle that right now.
Right.
So it's like, where do we go? So at this point, Jonny's brother, who lives in Wisconsin, reaches out to him and says, hey, why don't you don't have community? Why don't you guys come out here? You can live with us. You can like get your feet under you again. And Jonny, you can help me with this music project I'm doing. And I think at the time we were like, okay, here's somebody saying like offering us something that could be really helpful, even for us to get away from all the drama going on and all the pain here.
Yeah.
You know, that it seemed like a really good idea, you know?
So you guys moved to Wisconsin.
We packed up all of our stuff in our house and put it into storage. So it was 3 months after we got married. All of my new wedding gifts went into storage.
There was stuff that never even came out of the box.
No, it never even came out of the box, and it got packed up and put into storage. And we took a van because we were going to move into their condo with them in a bedroom that was the size of a closet. You guys saw it.
Seriously, I don't even know how you guys did that.
Yeah.
We stayed there for a couple days. And I was claustrophobic the whole place was claustrophobic.
Yes. I still can't go in a closet because of it. But anyhow, you know, I think so we packed everything up, and on the way to Wisconsin, I remember literally just crying the entire way because my dissociation bubble had popped. So all my pain's on the surface, and it's like I could not make sense of my life. I could not figure out the bomb that I literally felt like a bomb went off in my life, and I'm sitting in the rubble like I don't know how to make sense of what just happened. And I would just cry. And the minute we showed up to Wisconsin and we got upstairs and I saw that bedroom, everything in me shut down. And I went, what did we just do? What did I just do?
Yeah, the regret.
Yeah. I was like, what did I just do? I don't even know what I was in trauma. I was just in trauma.
Well, and it wasn't, I mean, if we're being honest, it wasn't just the bedroom. It was you had this feeling almost like you had gone to a different country. Like you had this feeling of like, I have left behind my entire family. I have left behind everything I know. Like,
yeah. Well, and the furthest east I had ever been was Colorado. I'd never been further. My family's from LA, and now I'm moving to the Midwest where it's dark, it's cold. It was the worst winter in 30 years. It snowed every single day, and I had to commute an hour away.
I think it snowed 110 inches that winter.
Ooh. Oh. It was insane. And Colorado is one of the sunniest states in the U.S. I'm not used to being in doom and gloom. Yeah. What I call doom and gloom. The gray sheet that lingers over the Midwest. I cried every single day. I mean, I just... And what was so hard is that, I mean, I just was... The thing is that I was in so much trauma, but the sad thing is about that time is that the more unsafe, when I start to feel unsafe in life, I reach for connection. And when Jonny feels unsafe in life, he avoids connection. And those are our attachment styles. We didn't know that at the time. I wish we would have, because it would have changed our lives.
Totally.
But, so what started to happen is that the more unsafe I felt, the more I reached to Jonny for reassurance and compassion and love.
What did that look like to reach, though? Well, go ahead, Jonny.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I mean, I had never been in a serious relationship. And even in the context of my home, like my parents didn't really fight in front of us. And so I had no concept of how to care for somebody who's falling apart.
Right.
And so a big part of the problem is that not only had Pietze lost everybody in her life, but when she started falling apart, I completely abandoned her emotionally in those moments because, and it wasn't intentional, obviously, but I just did not know what to do.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I think I've always been a little averse to emotions, and by a little, I mean a lot, you know? And so, I mean, Pietze will recount stories, and it's heartbreaking for me when I process through. I mean, I'm sure we all have those moments that if you think about them, it's like you want to go back and punch yourself in the face, you know?
Why would you do that?
But there's these moments like Pietze could probably tell it better than I can, but like where she would be sitting on the end of the bed weeping, and I'm just standing in the corner of the room, completely silent. Like not comforting her, not doing anything, because I was just completely frozen. My response in traumatic moments is to freeze.
A freeze response.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard because not only had everybody in her life abandoned her or it had just fallen apart, but at the same time in that moment, me, the person who was the most safe person in her life, also began to pull away and abandon her.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Do you want to talk about a little bit of, maybe you want to tell the story about when you kind of hit your wall and you're like, I maybe need to leave?
Yeah. And I will say this, like, even in retrospect too, like one of the things that Jonny's realized is like, you know, growing up, he felt ultra responsible for his mom and her emotions and making sure, like, his codependency started in childhood. So then when he has a wife who's in trauma, you know, he's triggering, like, I don't know how to make this okay. Now I am actually responsible for her. I don't know how to lean in. And so it just made it really difficult. And the thing is that when he would go into freeze, I thought, man, like, why are you such an asshole to me? Like, what I need right now is someone leaning in, being like, hey, I love you. I'm here. It's going to be safe. It's going to be okay. And I would have been like, okay, I have a yes in my heart. Like, I can stay here. I can do this.
And I was just completely gone.
Yeah. But now as we've dissected it and understood it, I understand, like, oh, he wasn't being an asshole. He was a scared little boy who didn't know what to do. He had no idea what to do. He had a wife who was falling apart. He was desperately trying to hold it together. When we moved out, we had thing after thing after thing financially that had fallen apart. We had no money. I mean, it just was so hard. And he was just trying to figure out what to do.
Well, and if you think about it, it'd be very startling. I mean, people don't know this listening, but Pietze is one of the most strong, capable, confident, powerful people I know. Like growing up, she was like the rock. All the time, and very powerful, and like take over the world, and like travel on her own everywhere she needs to go, and like freedom and wild and independent. And then she got married, and when she went into her breakdown, it was like she was a different person. She reverted to a little girl who was completely incapable, completely overwhelmed, like was terrified to drive, was like couldn't go places by herself. Like she was a different human. So Jonny gets married, and then within 3 months, it's like the woman he married is gone. And there's a new person here that he has no context for, no grid for, never met, never saw coming, has no idea what to do with, and is in over his head. And I think about even just Justin, when we got married, he was 25 and very emotionally intelligent. And it was so overwhelming for him to deal with my emotions.
I felt devastated by it. And especially when you don't have a model to show you what to do with it. And
like you didn't have a dad that showed you when mom's crazy, this is how we handle it. Well,
no, it was very similar circumstance to Jonny. It's even the idea of like, I'm supposed to like somehow I'm responsible for these emotions of this person. Maybe I'm even to blame for it. I don't know. And I don't know what to do to fix it right now. And no one's ever shown me. And I don't know who to go ask about it. And I'm just feeling like I'm failing miserably.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing because at this point, like when we're telling the story now, we can actually see that there aren't villains in it.
No.
Right.
Like we're like, of course, Pietze, you're in pain. Your whole world, like all of your relationships have dramatically changed. I got married that year, so you felt like you lost me a little bit. Me and Justin were traveling on the road trip. It was much harder to communicate all the time. You'd lost all of your closest friends. You'd lost your whole life purpose.
I mean, and also like me and you went from talking like twice a day, even after I was married, to like now you're married and I'm married, and it's
maybe once a week.
Once a week, you know? And I had just lost every single close relationship in my life, you know, primary relationship in my life. So it was just,
people know that season. When it rains, it freaking pours.
And,
And
then you have Jonny, who's a couple of years younger than you as it is. Even though he feels very mature for 18, he's still a couple of years younger than you as in that. And then he has literally no context from his history of where he grew up, of like
had never been in a conflict with another person before in his life.
Right.
You know, so even when we started to have conflict, to him, that was like, why is this woman crazy? Like there must be something wrong with our relationship, because he had never experienced conflict before.
Right.
You know, because he had never been in an intimate relationship before.
And I had already subconsciously developed the belief that I couldn't trust your emotions.
Yeah.
At that point. So there was already a sense of like, this is just Pietze. Like sometimes she might just freak out and dump you at Disneyland, but she'll come back and she'll be fine. And then maybe you'll get married and everything's great. And then she'll freak out and be like, I can't do this career anymore. And then you just kind of move on to the next thing, you know?
And so
I think I kind of hunkered down and just was like, I'm just going to keep putting one foot in front of the next.
I can't trust her emotions. I can't. So when you can't trust someone's emotions, then you often can't validate them.
Right.
Yeah. The problem with that belief is that I have made countless terrible decisions based on that belief.
That you can't trust her emotions.
Really wrecked our life.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say this, like, so we had committed to we're going to stay there for a year. And then after a year, we'll kind of reassess where we're at. So I was like, just hold on a year, just hold on a year. And the whole year I was miserable. I cried every day. And we get to the end of the year and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go home. And Jonny's like, go home to what? Go home to what? What do you want to go home to? Like the home you want to go home to doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. It's
completely dismantled. This is the only thing we have. But I mean, it just devastated me. It devastated me. And And I think, you know, in turn, also, we were living with Jonny's brother, and there was a whole element of like, you know, he had always wanted a close relationship with his brother. And so when I became emotionally crazy, Jonny latched onto his brother for safety.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
And so,
The surrogate.
yeah, totally. And was like, okay, now me and my brother are going to build this band. And so now I have vision, and I don't have to be tied to this crazy girl all the time. And I have so much compassion on him for doing it, because I'm like, yeah, I can imagine after your girlfriend breaks up with you, then you get married to her, then she decides that she can't do ministry anymore. The whole thing you guys have built your relationship on. Then you move out to Wisconsin, and the whole time you're there, she doesn't want to do it. That would feel crazy. You would be looking for something outside of the marriage to feel stable, you know?
Well, and I think that in that season, because I was so young when we got together, and because I was never really an adult outside of you, I think there was an element where I went back into adolescence in that time.
Yeah. And so,
you know,
yeah. And that leads me to the next point, which was that at that point, I had said to you, like, I can't do this anymore. I have got to go home. Like,
Yeah.
I can't be here. And even the dynamic of you with your brother, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm married to you. I feel like you're married to your brother, and I'm along for the ride, and I just can't do this anymore. And we always, you know, refer back to the fateful conversation, but Jonny just basically said to me, like, if you go home, I'm not following you.
Ugh.
And I know it's such a hard one for both of us to recount. But I think at that point I was like, okay, so now I have to decide that I either try to figure out how to be safe or I keep my marriage.
Yeah.
And in the end, I was like, I'm going to keep my marriage. But the problem
Because
is
the idea was, if I go back, I feel safe.
if I go back, I think I can feel safe again.
Right. But I have to let go of the idea of that if I stay here, and I'm going to choose a marriage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but the problem is that put me in a position where I martyred myself to Jonny, and I victimized myself to him, and subconsciously he became the villain. So then I got hypercritical of him, you know, like, because I felt trapped.
Yeah.
So then I didn't have a voice. I couldn't, and in retrospect, I could have had a voice. I could have had boundaries. I could have brought people in. At the time, I didn't know what to do. And let's be honest, the people that I did bring in were like, you made a commitment, you got to stick with it.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I made a commitment. I have to stick with it. I don't know what else to do, you know? And then we had another conversation. And I will say, even through this, because it sounds like, you know, we're giving you the hardest pain points.
Totally.
There were so many ways where Jonny showed up for me in that season that were so loving and so kind. Like on a daily basis, he'd be like checking in with me, or bring me lunch, or be like, how are you doing? Like, take me on really sweet dates. You know, like we had no money. We would like go get these bread bowls at Panera and sneak them into the dollar theater and watch a dollar theater movie. And we still laugh about like, that was like such a sweet time in our relationship, because we had no money, but we were just trying so hard to like and he would always do it. He'd find things. He's like, I found this dollar theater so we could go have a date. We'd have like a dollar theater date once a week, you know, and like trying his best just to make life okay for me in some way, you know? And so, and that's who I loved, and that's who I married, you know?
So so it's really confusing.
Yeah.
On one hand, you're feeling really loved by him and supported, and like you can tell he's putting intention into it.
Yep.
And on the other hand, he's disconnected and hardened towards you.
Yeah. And just we're not on the same page. Like this doesn't feel like a marriage anymore.
And I can imagine that with some of the dominance you're talking about, like you'd become probably pretty aggressive when you were feeling scared and out of control, like the abandonment. And he probably, given his severe dissociation and not like, it was probably deep turtling that he did. And it just kept this spiral of cyclical
the more I pushed for connection, the more he pushed away and dissociated and disconnected. And then that would make me feel crazy to the point where I would be like, almost like hyperventilating with emotion. Like, why won't you love me? Why won't you connect with me? Like, why can't you just love me? And the truth is that knowing now, like, it's so It's so healing to understand what was actually happening for him now and his experience without being defensive of it. Because it can feel like if I validate your pain of that, it invalidates my pain.
Right.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we both have pain around the same things, and they're both true. They're both not right, and they're both right, and they're both wrong to some degree. It's just, and somewhere in the middle is truth. But understanding what was happening for him, that he was actually so terrified and didn't know what to do, has been so healing for me, because it's made me realize that the man that I married, he was still that man the whole time. Because after we got married, I felt like he changed too. I'm like, where's the guy who loves me, who would do anything for me? But he was there the whole time.
You're just frozen.
He was just frozen.
Yeah. No, I was so frozen. I didn't have any idea what to do in that season. And I think part of the problem is that I had no self-awareness, and so I had no way of looking at myself and having compassion on myself. And so I just took on a mentality of like, we just got to make this work. We got to work harder. We got to find a way. We got to, whatever we have to do, we just have to do it. But that also translated into me being hard, because I was hardened towards myself. I was also hardened towards Pietze.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have compassion on her, honestly. Like, and even in my mentality, when I look back at those times, like, I didn't feel compassion towards her. I just felt scared and like, this is crazy and I don't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And that created so much trauma for her, because here's this guy who, is like watching his wife fall apart in front of him, and he has zero compassion for her.
Right.
Isn't it interesting how when we're in a deep fear state in an experience, we can all of a sudden slowly begin to, out of self-protection, vilify people that we tremendously love, we tremendously care about. And inside of doing that, all of a sudden we start looking like entirely different people. And when in all reality, like, that is such a facade to the reality of like, oh no, there's a scared little boy, a scared little girl who actually love each other behind all of this. And it's so easy for couples to suddenly get into a place of like, you're not the person I married. No, they're actually there.
Yeah.
They're hiding somewhere behind all of the pain and all of the fear and all of the confusion and all of the disappointment that they don't know how to communicate. And honestly, if in those moments, you and Jonny had the tools of being able to stop looking externally at the problem, look internally, and know how to navigate this internal thing, you would have been able to look inside and go, oh, this isn't about this. This isn't about this person's actions right now. This is about my fear and my history with my family,
my
and
abandonment.
And all of a sudden, the villain would disappear. Compassion would flood into the scenario. Because like you're talking about, even now in retrospect, compassion floods into it, because both of you are very self-aware of your actions and your heart postures and what was going on inside of you.
Yep. Well, and even for Jonny, like, it's interesting because he's like, oh, I always saw you as so weak during that season. Mm-hmm. But now that I understand what was actually happening inside of you, like,
you were so strong.
Yeah, you were so strong. Like, you stuck with me. You gutted it out when you had nothing left, And so
I think too, for me, I mean, and I think for me, one of the things that is probably the biggest influencing factor of that season was my terrifying fear of wasting my life. And I think, and that's really only changed in it's still changing. I mean, I'm in the middle of my mental breakdown midlife crisis right now of trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing with my life. But in that season, because of growing up in the church and just, some of the things from my parents about their own regrets about their life, I had this fear that if I just if I simply lived my life and worked a job and had a marriage, that was going to be a waste of my life because I needed to do something bigger and better with my life. And so I think that really influenced the way that I looked at things back then, because if I went back there now, I'd be like, we just got to move and I got to get a normal job and we'll figure out the rest of this stuff later. Like, we just need to stabilize and then we'll come back to vision and purpose and all of that stuff, in a couple years.
Yeah.
But there's such high stakes on it. Yeah.
There's such high stakes on it. And I think a lot of people experience that. A lot of people from that generation of Christianity experience that a lot. The pressure of not wasting your life and of doing something important for God.
Well, and that's where I think, like, there was that conversation where we had talked about, oh, why don't you go back to college and you can work and have a backup plan? And you were like, I don't want
to do that.
I just want to do the band, and at the time, I wasn't like, I had made this vow internally that I said, he's not ready to be married. And so if I'm going to stay in this, I have to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be able to take care of me. He's not who I thought he was. I'm going to have to take care of myself here in order to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think, like, now that I see it, I'm like, yeah, because you had so much internal pressure on you to not waste your life that it almost became spiritual to you. It became the foundation. I had no idea that at the time. I just thought, oh my gosh, like, what a jerk, Yeah. And so go ahead, Jonny.
Well, I was just going to say, and I just want to say, and I know that we're on a podcast right now, but you always told me, like, I feel like I'm not enough for you. And the truth is, like, if I'm being 100% honest, you weren't enough for me.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest regrets of my life.
Yeah.
Is because I couldn't see past my need to do something important with my life. Like, you weren't actually enough for me back then. Like, I had to have purpose. I had to have something greater.
Yeah.
And it's honestly one of the biggest regrets of my life, that I couldn't have just set that aside and been like, look, we need to walk through this season together. We need to process this together. And then we'll come back to it,
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, I'm really sorry.
Thanks, babe. I really appreciate you saying that. That makes my heart feel really seen by you. And I mean, honestly, like, even looking back on that situation, like, I just have so much compassion for that kid, because I think, man, like, you were 19 years old. We had nobody in our life. We had no one to help us. We had lost our faith during that time. Everything was shaky. Like, how do you even navigate that? And so I just look back at you and I'm like, yeah, you were just trying to find something that felt stable in the midst of chaos. Like, you weren't trying to be a jerk. You were trying, and I, like, commend you for trying to do that,
Yeah.
And you're following what you thought was right. Like, you thought the spiritual law was, it's so important to do, like, purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, purpose over loving the person in front of you.
Yeah.
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 It was what you were taught. So you were really doing what you thought was the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm so glad to be on the other side of this. That's for sure. Like, I'm so glad. Like, it's actually really healing. Like, moments like that were honestly deeply painful. Like, deeply painful moments that I hid away in my heart. Like, I don't know if I'll ever get seen, or I don't know if I'll ever understand, like, how scary it was for me, or how much I,
Yeah.
I had, felt so on my own in every way.
Yeah.
So much, like, I don't know. I just really, I loved you so much, that I didn't want to lose you,
Yeah. I loved you too. I was so scared of losing you.
I know. But it's so good to be on this side of things and to be able to talk through it and to be able to, without defenses or blame.
Yeah.
And before, like, I had fought so hard to get seen that I would try to use blame to get seen,
Yeah.
but it's not safe for someone to take ownership when they feel so blamed and villainized.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a big turning point in our story where I had to get rid of blaming, like villainizing Jonny, because what happened over the years is the more I felt unseen by him, the more I villainized him in the story.
Yeah.
And it created so much distance between us, you know, because
And the more you villainized me, the more I abandoned you.
yeah, totally. 100%.
It's a cycle.
Yeah, but I think it's just like I feel so thankful to be on this side of things where we can actually talk through it, because it brings these moments like even this where it's just
Yeah.
it's so healing. Like I can feel my
Yeah.
heart that has been so stuck in the pain of like
Yeah.
abandonment, or so stuck in the pain of like I felt so scared. I was so scared that I was going to have to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Or that I would end up, I was going to stay in this marriage with someone who didn't love me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd lost
honey.
everyone in my life. But now I look back and I'm like, I feel so healed because I can see who you were back then.
Right.
And I can see your heart, and I can see, you know, that you were trying so hard. And even now it's so healing to be on this side of the journey and to be able to talk through it without me blaming, and with Jonny being able to lean in, and vice versa. Like he doesn't blame and I'm able to take ownership and say, yeah, I was critical. Yeah, I probably like now in retrospect, you were a 9. I could probably completely shut you down as a human being. I showed
Yeah.
up the absolute worst way I could have for your personality type, in a way that would have actually
Yeah.
destroyed you emotionally. And when I think back to that girl destroying this boy who is scared shitless, trying his best to hold it all together, I want to punch myself in the face. I want to go back
We
and
all want to
protect
punch ourselves in the face.
Yeah, I want to go back and protect you. Like there have been times
Yeah.
where I've almost even had to visually picture myself being like, leave him alone. He's trying his best. Like I was such a bully at times, you know?
Yeah.
And recognizing that, like I've had to be so humble in this season. Like I feel like I'm constantly eating my own shit. Like just when Jonny turns around and is like, yeah, I did this wrong. I'm like, yeah, well, I also did this wrong, you know? And but it's healing, because also when you get to the bottom of it and you realize underneath all the pain, you actually have someone who actually just loves you, even though you hurt them so badly.
Yeah.
And most marriages, even when I'm working with couples, there's just so much pain that it's hard to see that. Or any close relationship, parent, kid, friends. Like at the heart of it, like you actually love the person so much that even if they hurt you, you're like, hey, I love you. You're worth it, you know, but there has to be that ability to lean in and have the conversation, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's why, I think that's why even the content of the course and the process that we've gone on is so crucial, because so much of the time what happens in couples like us is that you develop all of this pain and trauma early on. And if you just leave it, you know, things are way better between us now. But if you leave that pain and you don't actually walk the process of healing it and getting in touch with yourself and having compassion on yourself and having compassion on the other person and the whole process of everything, it will ruin your life.
And it almost
You know what I
did
mean?
to ours.
Even when it's way back there in the rearview mirror. You know what I mean? That this pain is a long time ago.
Well,
for
and that's
us.
just the thing, is that the pain doesn't actually go away. It just keeps showing up.
It never goes away.
It keeps showing up in different ways, in different circumstances over the years, until you finally, you know.
We honestly didn't start healing this pain until what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's like 11 years of this pain just sitting there
And growing
and getting infected, and yeah, it just doesn't go away. But it's the thing is, and for all of you 9s out there who are terrified of conflict and being wrong and all of the things that are evil in this world and just want to go into your cave like me and avoid everybody else. The truth is, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. It's never as bad as you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? It's like throwing up. Like you don't want to throw up. You don't want to throw up. And then you throw up and you feel way better, like instantly. You know what I mean? And that's what this process is like. When you actually start having compassion on yourself and then you're able to lean in and take ownership and have compassion on the other person, it's not nearly as scary as you think it's going to be. It's like the build up to it that makes it feel so terrifying. And then you actually get into it and you start being like, yeah, I was really awful back then. And I feel so bad and I'm so sad about it. Then it's so much easier than you think it's going to be when you actually start going on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love getting to hear, Jonny, how much compassion you have for Pietze now.
Yeah.
And how much you see her and have been able to connect to that for her.
I mean, it all started from me being able to have compassion on myself. And I think that's one of the bigger problems for me over the years is that I've never had compassion on myself. I've always been pretty hard on myself. And that leaves me not being able to have compassion on Pietze because I just kind of have this my heart is hardened, you know, but as I began to have compassion on myself, even in situations that had nothing to do with Pietze, situations from childhood, my heart began to soften towards her. And one of the things that was initially really helpful for me in the process was, and for people who have done SOZOs or any sort of like inner healing, reparenting, whatever you call it, like being able to go back into those situations and have compassion on myself was such a good starting place. But then I was able to go back into those situations, not as myself, but as like a third party, and be able to see this 21, 22-year-old girl whose life is falling apart and have so much compassion on her, like to the point where it's just like it like is heart-rending, like it breaks my heart. But what enabled me to do that was not viewing it as she's attacking me, but viewing it as like, if this is just a third party person, you know what I mean? If some random person came up and told me this is what they're going through, my heart would be broken for them, you know? But in the situation, it's very difficult to feel compassion because all you feel is like, this is my fault. You're upset at me. I need to defend myself. I need to, you know, because in my mind, I'm trying everything I can to make this work.
Right.
But when I can go back into those situations and see this scared little girl, essentially, I mean, she was so young and so alone, it breaks my heart. And that was a huge turning point of being able to have so much compassion on what I put her through in a way that doesn't villainize myself, you know? Like there's definitely been seasons where I've hated myself for what I put Pietze through, for sure.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with that sometimes. I mean, sometimes I just want to yell at her, like, why on earth did you even stay with me? Like, what were you thinking? You should have left me, you know? So I still have that sometimes, but that never ends up being productive.
No. Well, and I was thinking about, for years, I watched you not be able to talk with her about the hard things. And
no, I couldn't talk
because
at all.
you had so much self-hatred and shame. And so this big pain that you both had to go be locked in the closet.
Yeah.
And then once you got to the place of, and I really watched it when we did the course, because we recorded it 2 years ago, and then you edited all the footage. So you had to watch us talk about it over and over and over and over again. And I began to see compassion, and that really began this journey of you being able to validate and step in and see healing. And I'm really excited. It feels beautiful listening to a couple be able to own their story, and there's something healing about listening to people own their own behaviors without shame. Like I'm listening to both of you and you're like, yeah, I was critical. And you're like, yeah, I was hardened. And you're being able to say these things without it being, I'm a failure and I ruined everything. and without blaming each other. It's a beautiful thing to listen to a conversation like this. It feels like a sacred space and is so healthy. And I just feel really proud of you both. I'm excited about what is next to come. You know, we're going to talk through porn issues and deception and
oh gosh,
all the fun stuff.
And
everybody's
gonna
gonna
get
hate
real
me by the
juicy.
time we're done with this.
well,
No.
and Pietze's
Spoiler
bullying.
alert: I have not made the best decisions in life.
And Pietze hasn't either. The truth
No.
is that your guys' story is such a human story
Yeah.
of two people trying to survive in pain, and your pain complicating things for each other. So you guys want to stay tuned because you're going to continue to feel healed just hearing people take ownership and understand why they did what they did and redefining your story. Like when I saw Jonny, he recognized, I could see this light bulb when he actually recognized going back to the past could bring healing. It's not just for the sake of hating each other. It's not just for the sake of going over something over and over again. It's actually for the sake of liberating the girl inside you that was trapped in that moment and the boy inside him that was trapped in that moment.
Yeah, like this healing moment that we just had that's what we teach you to do in the course, and that's why we developed it, is so that you could get to those moments of healing and see each other for who you are.
Yeah. So go to justinandabby.com if you want information on it. The Pathway to Freedom. Discover how your emotions are trying to heal you. Yay. Come back next week.
I really appreciate the two of you. Just so I'll wrap it with this. The vulnerability of where you guys postured yourself to be really connected to yourselves and each other in this conversation here. And I think it is miraculous because Jonny, we've been married 13 years. You guys have been 14, I think, or about a year longer than us. And I've gotten to see you from way back then to even hearing your process and how you're feeling in this last couple of years is, if Jonny could come out of
This is the truth. This is going to be the most true statement of the entire podcast right here. So everybody listen up.
If Jonny could come out of the disconnected dissociation lifestyle that he was living in, anyone can.
Anyone can.
That's not an exaggeration.
And
that is not an exaggeration.
It's interesting, Jonny. This is the last thing I'll say to you. I feel like when I'm listening to you talk, I feel so much more endeared to you. I already love you. You're family to me as it is, but I feel so much more endeared to you. I'm like, oh, those barriers that Jonny's had inside of his world, I can really feel them gone. And that gives such an on-ramp for someone to connect to you and be close to you. And that's the other thing that comes out of participating in stuff like a course like this in this way, is that all of a sudden our hearts become on-ramps for the world around us to get close to us, to know us, and to see fully who we really are.
Timing's hysterical that we made this course 2 years ago and then he had to listen to it over and over and over and over and over again while editing
I think they might have just made it for me.
They're like, okay, so we're going to make this course and can you edit it? Wink, wink. You're going to get all the content.
Well, guys, thanks
guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Hey, everybody out there, remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share.
Share it.
Share
it to your friends.
Share alike.
Share.
And come back for the goodness of the rest of it.
The juicy bits.
The juicy bits.
On that note,
Juicy bits coming up.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.